Hi, my name's Bob Brown and welcome to my 8 and 35mm channel. I'm going to do something which kind of contradicts my normal philosophy, and that is I'm going to add color to one of my old black and white images. And back in the day, I shot primarily black and white, but I didn't always finish off the roll, so I take a few throwaway shots just to get it in the can and develop it and do all that stuff. One of those shots was my old 1970 GTO. And to be perfectly honest, I wish I shot it in color. But fast forward to today, and I'm going to make that image color. And I'm going to make it so good, you'll never know it wasn't shot in color. I'll use two methods. One is through Photoshop, their neural filter, and the other is through a website called, palette.fm. And that's a free service. It's also a pay service, but I'm going to use the free side of it and use that image as an overlay. You'll see what I mean when I do it. The car is a 1970 GTO, and I think I shot that in late 1972. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when I shot it. So let's take a look on, well, you know what? As a matter of fact, I'm going to put the cart before the horse. I'm going to show you the end result first, and then the work behind it to create that image. Let's take a look at that. And there she is, my blue GTO. Well, gray GTO at the moment. It's not going to stay that way because we're going to colorize it. We'll use two methods to colorize this image. One is Photoshop and the other is Palette FM. The lower left image shows the Photoshop color conversion. The lower right shows the final processed image. Overall, I think it came out pretty good. This one is the before and after with Palette FM. The lower left shows the colorized overlay. The lower right is the processed final image. This one came out really good as well. This is a side-by-side of the two final images. Photoshop is on the lower left and Palette FM is on the lower right. I did all of the processing for both images in Photoshop. When I compare these two images, I think Palette FM did the better job. I say that because the end result was more of a natural-looking image. Even the trees look good because that's the way those trees look that time of the year. Or any part of the year for that matter, because we don't get seasons per se in South Florida. Even the blue paint job on the Palette FM version, it looks more realistic. Well, at least I think it does. You might have a different opinion. Now let's take a look on how to take a black and white image and convert it to color in Photoshop. It's surprisingly easy. The first step is to load our black and white image into Photoshop. Since our image is black and white, it will automatically default as a grayscale image. You can't add color to a grayscale image. Therefore, we need to convert this to an RGB format. In other words, color. Go to Image, Mode, and notice the grayscale has the check mark. That's the default. However, we're going to drop down to RGB color, highlighted in blue. Select that. Now this image will accept color. Then copy the original background layer to protect that original image. With our background layer copy selected, go to Filter, Neural Filters. We want to use the colorized filter. I put a green box around it which points to the activation switch. Select the switch and that will instantly colorize our image. I do realize this looks pretty awful. However, you still have to fully process the image. This simply puts us at a great starting point. Now let's do this all over again, but with palette.fm. This is the palette.fm website. The upper right-hand corner has a white bar which says Colorize Photo. Select that white bar. Then find the folder with your black and white image. Select your image and then select Open at the bottom. The program will automatically load in its classic palette filter. It looks pretty awful. Let's go to the next one, Bright Essence. I think that looks pretty good. Let's try out a couple more. Ooh, not too good. And that one's not going to work either. So Bright Essence it is. All we have to do now is select the download button at the bottom and the image will go back to the same folder it came from. Now open your photo editor. In this case, it's Photoshop, but it doesn't have to be Photoshop. As always, I'm going to make a copy of my original background layer. At that point, I'll go to the folder where I keep my colorized image. And now I'm going to select it and drag it right on top of our current image. Now I'll highlight all of the images. I want to make sure all of the images are perfectly in line with each other, so we're going to auto-align them. To do that, simply go to Edit, Auto-Align Layers. The Auto-Align Layers dialog box will open up, and make sure you select Auto. Then, OK. Next, go ahead and turn off the original bottom layer. We're not going to touch that layer anymore. We want to protect it. From here, we'll go to the Blending Modes drop-down box. I'll then select Color. Notice how our overlay blends beautifully into the black and white image. Also, notice the Palette FM watermark went away once we selected the Color Blending mode. That's because we're only using the colors. Their watermark is grayscale. From here, I'll then make a copy of our top two layers. With only the top two layers selected, I'll now right-click and select Merge Layers. We now have a single combined layer from those two layers. I'll then highlight the bottom three layers and put them into a group. To do that, just select Ctrl or Command G. We now have those three in a folder. Now I'll just rename the folder. And that's pretty much it. Well, sort of. You still have to edit your image to get it to where you want it. In this section, I'm going to put some paint on my car and in the grass and on the stop sign and a few things. And you're going to see how the blending mode works. And it's really important because that's how you get your paint to look completely realistic. I'm not going to paint the whole car, but I'm just going to do little snippets of everything so you can see how it works. Before we get started, I just wanted to show you these really useful shortcut keys, which I use all the time. I find them really convenient, easy to use, and they really speed up my workflow. Okay. We're going to give my old 1970 GTO a paint job. As always, the first thing we're going to do is copy our background layer. Then I'll turn off the background layer so it's no longer visible. Then we'll create a new blank layer above the car. We'll name that layer blue because that was the color of my car. To save time, I went ahead and figured out the correct blue color code. I named that text layer that code. That way I could just cut and paste it in. I'll highlight the layer blue to make sure it's active. I'll click on the black foreground color picker box. Try saying that 3 times real fast. And that opened our color picker dialog box. I'll enter my color code into the color code box at the bottom. That will create our correct blue. And there it is. Notice also it affected all of the numbers for each type of color code, such as the RGB, the CMYK, HSL, and so on. And then we'll select OK, and that will put the correct color in the color picker color box. Oh man, trying to say that? Anyway, next we'll select the paintbrush tool. With our blue layer active, let's lay down some paint. I do realize this doesn't look too good, but don't worry about it because we're going to fix it. We're going to make that paint adhere and blend into the car itself. Now all we have to do is go to the blending mode options, tick the down arrow, and go down and select color at the very bottom. And voila! There it is, our paint job. Looks pretty good. Let's create a new layer, select the color picker box, and we'll figure out a good color red to use for my brake light. That red looks good, select OK, and select the polygon lasso tool. From here, I'll zoom in on the image, move to the back brake light, and use the polygon lasso tool to select the brake light. Man, I sure wish I washed that car first. Once we finish our selection, we can then go to the paintbrush tool and paint inside of that selection. And there you go. From here, you now go to the blending mode drop-down box and select color. If the red's a little too strong, like it is here, then just go over to the opacity, lower that down a little bit, and it should blend in perfect, like that. I'll now rename that layer Taillights. Now let's create a new layer to paint those hubs on the rims. I think I'll use the same red. I'll shrink down my brush a little bit so I can put a splash of red right on that rear hub. Then I'll do the same thing for the front hub. From there, like before, I'll go to the blending modes, select color, and then I'll drop the opacity down until those hubs look correct. Yep, that looks pretty good. I'll rename that layer Hubs. Then I'll create a new layer and name that Stop for the stop sign. I'll now do a quick paint job on the stop sign. Then I'll go over to the blending modes and bring it down to color. At that point, I'll lower the opacity till it looks good. And that does look pretty good. To save time, I did the grass real quick. I also went ahead and did the reflector. That's the original black and white. There's the color picker where I selected an amber color, which I think closely represented the original amber. I then painted the reflector, and finally I selected the color blending mode, and it blended in really nice. This image is everything we just did. Now let's take a look at what I did to get to that final image. What I'm not going to do here is process the image. I already did that in the previous two videos. I don't know if you watched them or not, but if you don't know, I already processed a black and white image and I processed a color image. That was the previous two videos. Those were full live edits. I'm not going to do that here because the process is like it's almost identical, except for the very beginning where you convert the image to color. Now, what I am going to do is go over each layer, starting from the very first image, layer by layer, so you can see what I did. And that should pretty much guide you through the entire process. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'll start where you can see the final image. I mean, it came out great. It looks like it was originally shot in color. You'd never know it came from a black and white negative. Unless someone told you, of course. Now let's look at all of the layers which created this final image. At the bottom right, I highlighted my original image. It has a green bracket around it. I'm going to use a green bracket as we go along so you can see each layer as we go. I then made a copy of the original layer. I then dragged in my Palette FM overlay and set the blending mode to color. I then put all of those first three layers into a folder. I did that by going Control G, or you can do Command G if you have a Mac. I highlighted those layers and went Alt, Control, Shift, and E. That creates a single image from all of those layers. And that's our image from those layers below. I copied that layer and called it Camera Raw. This image shows the work I did in Camera Raw. I also created a mask for the grass. Notice I got rid of that watermark. I added 4 new layers. The blue arrow shows a little bit of paint added to the grass. On another layer, I painted the red on the taillight. I also painted the hubs and the stop sign. Each one is on its own layer, with the blending mode once again set to color. Here, I adjusted and painted blue on the car. It got me a little closer to the actual color, at least the way I remember it. As a matter of fact, it's going to be even better by the time we get to the final version, which you already saw. This one is a new fresh image created from all of the active layers below. And remember, all you have to do is select Alt, Control, Shift, and E to create that new image. This is also the layer I used to remove all of the scratches and speckles. I went to Filter, Laser Soft Imaging, and selected the SRDX plugin. If you don't have this type of plugin, then unfortunately, you're going to have to do everything manually. You can still do it, it's just going to take a lot longer. I primarily use 2 tools to clean this image up. Look at the arrows on the upper right. I used the Spot Healing Brush tool and the Clone tool. This layer is a copy of the layer below. That's because if I screw something up, I won't have to start all over again. I went into Camera Raw for this layer and made some adjustments to the trees and the driveway. When I finished with that, I made a copy of this layer, and I used this layer to remove some of the blue which you could see inside of the windows. Next, I made 2 empty layers, both of which were to address some minor problems within the window. The bottom layer I used to paint some blue on the driver's headrest, and the one above it, I added some green paint to the trees. I changed their blending mode to color. I then created a new image from all of the layers below. It's called Final, although it's really not final. I then made a copy of the final image. I used them to add in just a little bit of sharpening. With the upper image highlighted, I went to Filter, Other, and High Pass. I used its slider bar to adjust the amount of sharpening I wanted and then selected OK. Then I made a new image from those 2 images. I went back into Camera Raw with this new layer, and what I did was I maxed out the noise reduction, and while there, I added in some sharpening. That's because the noise reduction tends to soften the image. As usual, I made a copy of that image and added an empty layer just above it. I then drew a line to recreate the edge of that bumper. I don't know what happened, but somehow it got lost during the mix. I bet you can guess what I did next. If you guessed made a new copy, you'd be correct. As my cooking thermometer would say, almost done. I renamed this layer Pre-Blue Fix, then made a copy of it, went into Camera Raw, reduced the colors purple and teal, which allowed the blue to really pop and shift closer to the original color. And that's pretty much it. As you saw, it's easy to convert an image to color. Well, I'm talking just the conversion. There's still a lot of work you got to do in the background, In other words, processing to get it to where you want. You saw all the layers I did to get it to its final destination. Sorry, but that's what it takes to get it there. Some images will be easier than others. I think this one was probably a little bit more on the difficult side, I guess. But listen, it came out great. And that's pretty much it. I hope you got something out of this. It was a useful video. And I'm not sure, but this might be my last video for this channel. I really don't have a whole lot of anything else to contribute. If I do, I'll do another video. But as of right now, I think this is it. Also, I want to spend some time learning Affinity Photo to where I can replace Photoshop. Affinity Photo is, and listen, I have nothing to do with Affinity. They're just like Photoshop. It's just everything's in a different location. And I want to use that program now because it costs way less and you own the product because you bought it. It's not subscription based. And Photoshop, it's like it's an ongoing, never ending subscription. It's like right now it's $9.99 a month for the photography app, they call it. That's going up. Everything's going up over there. So Affinity, that's the way to go for me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. And once again, thanks for watching.